extensively on the environment, both the good news, like your wild things in our backyard, and he has a book on that subject. He didn't bring it. But the wild nature of our backyard, you just stay out there long enough, you'll see some amazing things. Also on not so great things, like microplastics. There's a lecture here back in October on microplastics. So he is a guide for. Dan, do you want a mic? Is this being recorded, right? Yeah. Okay, I'm Michael Wilbacher. I welcome once again. He is a naturalist and gives nature walks and also walks around special mansions in the area. He has talked about some microplastics back in October, which is a very concerning threat to our health, and also the good news of the wild nature of our backyard, so that despite all the climate change, which he's going to speak today about, we have a very vibrant backyard here in the Delaware Valley. So without any further ado, I'd like to have Michael come up.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dan. Good evening. Great to be with you all. Yeah, as Dan mentioned, this is my third time coming to talk with you. I really appreciate that, and thank you for coming during an evening. I'm the author of Wild Philly. I did bring some books, if you'd like a copy, and I brought my marker so I can sign it for you if you would like. My website, mikewildbacker.com, explains all the programs from the 10 different lectures I give to nature walks at sites around the region. There's a calendar that shows you where I'll be at next. And as Dan mentioned, we talked about microplastics here in the fall, Wild Philly a little bit before that. Another one of the lectures that I give is the life cycle, the extraordinary life cycle of monarch butterflies, where a butterfly born here in Radnor in September knows how to get to a couple of mountain valleys in Mexico, west of Mexico City, when the species hasn't been there in 4 generations. It's just a remarkable thing. So I love talking about monarch butterflies. Tuesday was Earth Day. Happy Earth Day, Earth Week, Earth Month. So actually I've been happy to be giving this lecture multiple times during this month at a variety of places, and great to be here presenting in Radnor. So let's begin, we're going to tiptoe gently into this topic with a pop quiz. I'm going to give you 4 questions. They're going to be hard. You're not going to know the answers. That's fine. About 40 minutes from now, you will. You'll be able to know all. So this is a sense of what's coming up again right in a few minutes. So how many parts per million of CO2, carbon dioxide, are in the air right now? Important number to know. When you take a deep breath, how much CO2 is in the atmosphere right now? Check out those 3 numbers and make a mental note as to what you think the answer might be. Which season is changing the fastest from climate change? One season is changing at a speed greater than the other 3. Which of these do you think it might be? Philadelphia's largest precipitation events have increased by what % recently? And there are 3 numbers that get increasingly large. And as we talk, I'm going to use Philadelphia and Delaware Valley as interchangeable. So when I say Philadelphia, just substitute region for it. By 2100, Philadelphia's climate will most closely resemble which American city? Richmond, Atlanta, Brownsville, Texas. That's our pop quiz. We'll come back to this at the end and we'll see how you did. But before we actually wade into the conversation about climate change here in this area, let's start with a little climate change 101, because as the climate is changing, a number of things are happening. We're getting storms that are more intense, which often cause flooding, wildfires that are longer than they may have been historically, hotter than they may have been historically, and out of season even. The wildfire season seems to be expanding. And then you've got sort of from what I call the evil twin of flooding, which is drought. We seem to get epic droughts that are ultimately ended by huge floods. We seem to have one thing or the other. And as we look at the data, there's so many ways to slice the data, and every way you slice the data, we're coming to sort of the same conclusions. So we have unbelievable amounts of high-quality data about the state of our climate, and we know the direction that things are moving in. So here, and this is one of the important sources of data for this evening, is from a group called Climate Central, nonprofit that operates out of New Jersey. So they are great at not just creating organizing data, but also creating these images that are able to illustrate how we're doing. So in this one, look, we're going all the way back to 1880. And they've taken the years 1881 to 1910 as a nice 30-year chunk as an average. Let's take that average and then look at each year since then, whether it's warmer or colder than the average. And if climate change were random or not happening, you wouldn't see any directionality to this graph. You'd have hot years, cold years, hot years, cold years, years really hot, years really cold. So it would be a mishmash. But look, in the early part of this graph, from the 1880s into like the 1940s, you can see we had some cold years that were colder than that 30-year average. But since the 1940s into the 50s, we have not only been warmer than that 30-year average, but increasingly substantially warmer. In fact, if you look to the right side of the graph, you'll see that we are above what some of you might recognize as a magic number. When the UN gathers annually to discuss climate change and to look at where we're headed as a planet, for many years now, they've been the scientists associated with the research on climate change have been using the number 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is, you can see here, 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit, as kind of the benchmark. We're trying to keep the Earth's total temperature above a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase. That's what our mission is right now. We have a shot at things being relatively, quote, normal, unquote, if we're able to do that. And you can see in 2024, we poked above that number for the first time. So it's interesting to see how 2025 is going to shake out. But that's an important number. And here you can see that number here again. Actually, you've got these are all the years since 1950. And again, this time, this is a different source. So this study is using a different reference to organize the data around. So what this group did is, let's take 50 years between 1850 and 1900. Let's take a 50-year chunk of time. And now how much warmer than this 50-year chunk of time are you? And you can see the numbers are only 0.51, 1.52 degrees warmer than that 50-year chunk of time, right? So the Earth's temperature is finely tuned, and half a degree makes a huge difference. And you can see, if you look, as you climb the graph, you got this sort of, all these years pushed together towards the bottom, but as you get closer and closer, higher and higher up into the graph, you get fewer and fewer years. But then look at the last couple, 2023 and 2024. Go to the right side and look at how much higher they are than the years below them. 2023 and 2024 both jumped up, and there's this big gap. And scientists are really trying to figure out what happened here to make this so much different than here. I keep waiting to hear what they're thinking, but unfortunately, January of 2025 is the warmest January ever recorded by humans on planet Earth. So it's the hottest January ever. I didn't hear about February, but I do know March is also the same. It's been the warmest March ever. So there's that. We have satellites that can measure how much Arctic sea ice there is. We take photographs of it, and we can measure how much in square kilometers, millions of square kilometers, and you can see the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. There's an incredible direction as the sea ice shrinks. So the sea ice is contracting. That's a little bit globally. Here in the U.S., the 10 hottest years that the U.S. have experienced, with the exception of 1998, are all in the 21st century. And you can see as we get into more recent years, 2024 is the hottest year in the U.S. So let's back up even further a bit and get a sense of where we are with carbon dioxide, the gas that we pay careful attention to in conversations about climate change. So go back to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. This is how much CO2 the Earth's atmosphere had. So 280 parts per million is kind of the benchmark, the baseline. That's where we started. So when you translate that into percentages, it's a remarkably small number. So our atmosphere is like 70% nitrogen, 20% oxygen, and then a lot of other things. If you have 1 million molecules in a box of air, only 280 of them are carbon dioxide. So it's an incredibly small amount, but nonetheless, it's an incredibly important number. But through the burning of fossil fuels, what we've been doing is steadily increasing the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. So the burning of coal, oil, and natural gas. We've been pumping it out into the atmosphere, and there's the number right now. So as of February 2024, 427 parts per million, which is a 51% increase. So we've halved we've increased by half the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. By the way, this is an important piece of data. It comes from the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii. There's a professor whose name is Keeling, who started doing this in the 1950s. So we have continuous data from the Mauna Loa Observatory in the middle of the ocean, deliberately. So it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And we've got great data that shows the Earth's CO2 going steadily up since the 1950s, called the Keeling curve. His son actually has continued it. And look at it's published by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. Some of the best climate data for the U.S. and the world comes out of NOAA, which is one of the many agencies that have been hit by budget cuts and efficiency cuts. So many climate scientists are worried about NOAA's ability to keep telling us how things like CO2 are doing. But let's back up a little bit, more even so. We know how much CO2 is in the atmosphere now, but scientists have come up with incredibly clever ways to look at how much CO2 we've had over a long period of time. So this one goes back to the year 1000. We can find bubbles trapped in ice, and the bubbles, they can actually extract the atmosphere from that bubble and tell you how much CO2 was in that ice when that ice was laid down, however old it is. And so when you line up temperature and CO2, you can see the two follow each other. We also have these great ways of figuring out what the temperature of the Earth was in the year 1000. So you can see that the two track along, that as CO2 rises, temperature goes along with it. Even more extraordinary, we can go back 400,000 years. So this is CO2 levels over the past 400,000 years, and you can see that line across the middle of the graph is the 1950 level of carbon dioxide. And over the last 400 million years, we have never gone above that. And look where we are now on the far right. We've gone way above that. So humankind has never experienced CO2 levels in the 420 parts per million ever in our evolutionary history. In fact, the Earth has, but the last time the Earth had 420 plus parts per million of CO2 was 14 million years ago during the Miocene epoch. No people, lots of great mammals, really cool mammals. Post-dinosaurs, cool age of mammals, but it was a much warmer planet with no ice caps. So 420 was a very different planet than it is today. So that's some global big picture stuff. Let's get to climate change here in Philly. So I've been spending the last few years scouring the internet, reading up, and trying to figure out what does all of this mean for our region. Philadelphia Magazine, much to my delight and surprise, published this already 6 years ago, November 2019. What can a city do about climate change? I almost fainted when I saw that as the cover story. of Philadelphia Magazine, because usually you expect, what the best hoagie, the best cheesesteak. You don't expect a cover story on climate change. And you can see how the William Penn statue in City Hall is underwater. It's not going to be that bad. But nonetheless, point taken. So some of the data from this comes from here and from their studies, and I appreciate that. Also, the cities has an Office of Sustainability, and they put out this, that since 2010, Philly has experienced, our region, the snowiest winter, the 2 warmest summers, the wettest day ever, the 2 wettest years ever, 3 hurricanes, and 2 derechos. And I want to come back to derecho a little bit later, because climate change has given us new words to worry about. So most people haven't heard about derechos, but here we are. So the talk is divided into 3 parts: hotter, wetter, weirder. So in the title of the talk, I'm sort of signaling to you what's going to happen with our climate. So especially in this summer, you increasingly see chyrons like this when the weather report that it's going to be really hot. It's going to be really hot. Actually, today's kind of really hot all of a sudden, unseasonably so. It feels nice, but anyway. Philly, the region, has warmed bigger, more so than the state of Pennsylvania, and which is more so even than the U.S. So U.S. 2.6, the state 2.9, the Philadelphia region 3.7. A piece of Philadelphia's issue is the urban heat island, that Philadelphia has so many buildings, so much asphalt, right? All that rooftop and concrete and asphalt is all absorbing heat during the day, radiating it at night. So urban areas tend to be hotter than the countryside around them. So we've already warmed. The Philadelphia region has set records by data. I love the way this, you check this out. So again, let's look at a big chunk of time. This is from the 1870s. We have now decades of slices. This is versus the entire 20th century. So now we've got a whole century of data, right? And is it warmer or cooler? And you can see in the 1870s, actually 50% of the weather records were highs and 50% of the weather records were lows. And we actually had, in the 1970s, it got really cold. That was pretty crazy. But look towards the right side, and especially in the 2020s, 100% of recent weather records have been highs, nothing down here. And in the 10s and the aughts and the 90s, a few, but mostly all up in here. So it's getting warmer. In fact, warming is the new normal, says Climate Central. Here they've taken 30-year slices of data and compared each 30-year slice to the 20th century average. And you can see we're getting warmer and warmer. So much so that we now have 2.5 weeks of days above 88 degrees. Then more so than we did 50 years ago in the 1970s. So we've gained 2.5 weeks of extremely hot days. At current emission trends, by the year 2100, and this is a big caveat for lots of the data we're talking about today, is there should be an asterisk if current trends continue. So there's a lot that could happen. But when you see this data, just remember if current trends continue. So if present trends continue. So the surprise for me in looking at this graph is currently we don't get any days above 100 degrees. That's an anomaly. It's weird. It happens, but it's odd, and it doesn't usually happen. But if current emission trends continue by the year 2100, we will have more than a month. Like all of August will be above 100 degrees, which would change a lot of what we do. The first frost is coming much later. It used to come late October, sometime around Halloween. It now comes in mid-November, just before Thanksgiving. So the first frost comes later in the year than it did. Fall itself has warmed by 3 degrees, but what's interesting for me is that the nighttime in the fall has warmed even more, 3.5 degrees. So warmer fall nights does an interesting thing. If you're a fan of fall colors, you need cold nights, not warm nights. And the cold nights kill the chlorophyll in leaves, it freezes them. And as the chlorophyll dies back, other colors pop out. So in fact, yellows, where the yellow color was always in the leaf, was there all summer. There was just so much green it was overwhelmed. Green dies off, here comes the yellow. The reds and purples and oranges become mixtures of other things, other stuff going on in the chemistry of a leaf. But to get the classic fall colors that people like me look forward to, you need cold nights. Also need good rain. Drought's not good either. So warm nights, dull color. Cool nights enhance the color. Unfortunately, if we continue this where the evenings are warmer than the daytime, sadly enough, we may lose some of the fall color that we like. Winter, same thing, more warm winter days, 3 weeks of days above normal recently compared to 1970. So winter is getting warmer, but look how much, 4.8. Remember, fall was 3, winter almost 5 degrees warmer than 1970. So, and you can see on these graphs, there are years that go up and down, right? So it changes. Remember this past winter, we had some pretty cold days. So it'll be fun to see what the graph does, but you can tell there's a trend line beyond that. The less extreme cold has really moved. From 1970, the day with the minimum, the lowest temperature of the year, that day, has changed by 9 degrees. So it used to be like 2, 3 degrees. Now it's more like 10, 11. So those days of single digits, we still get them once in a while, but again, the trend is moving up. We've changed the lowest temperature of the year by 9 degrees. So consequently, fewer freezing nights, which is great if you're a tick, because you're not being zapped. Great if you're a mite that likes to nibble on foxes and cause mange. So we have lots of mangy foxes running around because the insects are not being zapped by the cold weather, which is what you like to have. But that's a whole month almost of fewer freezing nights since 1970. Very complicated graph to show a very simple thing. To the right, by the x-axis along the right is temperature. Going up the left side is snowfall. Basically, this makes sense. The warmer the winter gets, the less snowfall we have. A couple of winters ago, we had no snowfall whatsoever, never had to shovel snow once. My back was grateful for that, but it was kind of a weird winter to have zero snow. And I feel bad for kids. I think they're losing snow days to Zoom anyway. But when we were kids growing up, I mean, snow days was one of the happiest days of the year when you had a snow day. So you still can get days. So look right in the middle of this slide. There's a day with warm-ish, but tons of snow. So the weird thing is with climate change, if we're heating up the atmosphere, we're putting a lot of condensation up in there, and if the conditions are right, that stuff can fall out. So we still can get snow, and big snow. It doesn't happen. Statistically, it's more rare, but it can happen. And a big snow day is not proof that climate change isn't happening, unfortunately. So for 2/3 of the United States, the fastest warming season, surprisingly, is winter. Each of the seasons gets a shout out. The Pacific Northwest is struggling with summers. Most people didn't have air conditioning until recently in the Pacific Northwest. Didn't need it. The summer wasn't that hot. Summer's getting really hot out there. Spring is changing fastest in the far west, and through the Rocky Mountains down into Texas, it's the fall. But for a big swath of the U.S., winter is the fastest changing season, and significantly so. So one study that I came across indicated that, again, if present trends continue, Philadelphia's climate will most closely resemble Richmond, Virginia by the year 2050, 25 years from now. So we're becoming an increasingly southern city if present trends continue. But by the year 2100, let's go again another 50 years, by the year 2100, 75 years from now, If present trends continue, our climate will most closely resemble this Texas city, border city, tucked up against Mexico. This is Brownsville, Texas. So if our temperature here in Philadelphia is going to be closer to Brownsville by the year 2100, can you imagine what Brownsville's temperature is going to be? It may be close to unlivable. So there we go. That's how much our climate will have moved again if present trends continue. And just to put a bow around hotter, 2024 for us, it was the second hottest year in the U.S., second hottest for Philadelphia. And remember, we had a dry spell for a big chunk of last year, so it's 11% drier than normal, which is a funny segue. Even though last year was drier than normal, we're going to get wetter than normal through climate change. And this is in part because of the water cycle, which I'm sure you all remember fondly from elementary school, right? The sun heats up water, evaporates up, condenses to form clouds, move around the planet, precipitate down rain, snow, sleet, hail, and it moves around the land, and the same water goes round and around and around and around. What goes up must come down, so if the atmosphere is warmer, more water is evaporating, more water has to come down somewhere. So from Philadelphia Magazine, they talked to weather experts who think that the average precipitation will increase by 10 inches from 42 to 52 by the year 2080. Again, if present trends continue. What's also happening across the U.S., everywhere, when it rains, the tendency is to get more rain at one time. We get more downpours. Again, this is because of the atmosphere being supercharged with a lot of condensed water. So you can see the curve here from the 1950s into this ends at 2018. The annual number of 3-inch or more days compared to the average has been increasing dramatically. So we're getting more downpours across the whole country, which means we're getting more intense rainfall. And here's for Philadelphia. What they're trying to do here is divide the time when it's raining by, or the number of inches it rains by the time in which it's raining. So it's sort of over time, and there's a gentle curve up. It's only hundreds of inches per hour, but it's noticeable. So we're getting more rain. And here in Philadelphia, on the wettest day of the year, the deluge is bigger. In 1950, we got, less than 2.5 inches was a big rainstorm. Here, we're starting to approach 4 inches as the wettest day of the year. And you can see two spikes around 2000 and recently, like looks like 16, 17. We had an 8-inch day there. So the wettest day of the year has increased by a lot in the Philadelphia region. Climate Central put out this long list of 50 American cities with the biggest increases in heavy downpours. And I'm going to drill down into this so you can actually see it. But they compared the decades of the 1950s to the 10 most recent years when they worked on this, which then was 2005 to 2014. So they compared these 2 decades and what was the growth in heavy downpours. And you can see the top 3 cities were McAllen, Texas, a 700% increase, Portland, Maine, a 400% increase, and there's Philadelphia, number 3 out of the 50 cities they studied, a 360% increase. We finally beat New York in something. They're number 4. This is not something we want to beat New York in, but so a 360% increase in biggest downpours in the Philadelphia region. I directed the Lower Merion Conservancy in Lower Merion Township next door for 15 years and went to planning commission meetings dozens and dozens of times and waited to testify, sometimes 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm finally getting to testify. And when the commissioners were there discussing new subdivisions, the engineers, the staff, and the commissioners would have intense conversations about the 100-year storm. This was a hugely important thing in municipalities. A 100-year storm is the storm you should see once a century. right? Or, if you like statistics, over a century, it has a chance of happening only 1% in any given year in a century, right? So I'm not yet 100, right? So how many 100-year storms should I have seen in my lifetime so far? One or, right? 0 or 1, right? It should be. And just so you know what we're talking about, the 100-year storm is 7.5 inches in a condensed period of time. So it's 7.5, a lot of rain in a small period of time. This is a 100-year storm. This photograph is from the Inquirer. It's off of I-95. It's an exit ramp. There was so much water pouring off of I-95, they couldn't get their car out of there. I hope this couple made it. But we have these intense storms now that just blow us away. So the 100-year storm, 7.5 inches. I shouldn't have seen any. Some of you remember Hurricane Floyd, perhaps, in 1999. So that was a 100-year storm. So was Irene, who came only 12 years later. So here's in a 12-year stretch with 2 100-year storms. There was an unnamed storm, not a hurricane, but a loosely organized storm that suddenly walloped us. In 2021, it was a 1,000-year storm. But what's even crazier, in some parts of the region, Hurricane Ida, which came 3 Labor Day weekends ago, was a 1,000-year storm as well. So here we are. Some parts of the region had 2 1,000-year storms and 2 100-year storms, which some municipalities have said, you know, we need to redefine the 100-year storm since it's not working. We're seeing too many of them. So let's change the ordinances to work on that. And since we're talking about weather, we should do a little segue into flooding. This is Hurricane Sandy, which hit the Jersey Shore in 2012. I'm sure we all remember images from that. But flooding is happening in this region and across the U.S. The sea level has risen already in the United States. It's not something that's going to happen. It has risen by a foot across the United States. 2 things are happening with sea level rise. The first one is we're melting the ice caps, and so you're getting that additional water. But the second thing is, I'm sure you remember this from high school chemistry, when you heat a liquid, it expands. Heat the ocean, it expands. So we have those 2 things happening. We're getting water coming into the ocean from the melting ice caps, and we're getting an expanding ocean. But then look below that, the blue bar graphs, we're getting high tide flood days. So the ocean level has risen, and so now we're getting flooding on days when there's no rainfall. Florida has a huge problem with this, but we're starting to get it too. Across the eastern seaboard, New York, I know, suffers from this as well, but Philadelphia is getting it as well. I think Philadelphians, especially, now this is especially applicable if you're in the city of Philadelphia, we forget that the 2 rivers, the Schuylkill and the Delaware, are tidal. That the Atlantic Ocean rises, the Delaware Bay rises, so the Delaware River rises, so the Schuylkill River rises. And the Delaware is tidal all the way up until something like Bristol. So it's tidal for quite a stretch. A couple of the walks in Wild Philly are along the river, and the recommendation is to go during low tide, because it's really fun to walk on a natural area. We can actually be on the shore of the Delaware River, which is not something many of us have done. And this, you go to the Poconos to do that, but we can do it here in Philadelphia or on the Jersey side. It's really a blast. But look at this graph over time. The number of high tide flood days is rising, especially in the city of Philadelphia. So we're getting water infiltrating. So when you get a high tide that's especially high because the moon is in that special place, you get the neap tide, then you get that sunny day flooding. And this Inquirer article from a couple of years ago noticed that we're getting between 40 and 65 days of sunny day flooding by the year 20. Again, if present trends continue. That's only 25 years. That's like 2 months of sunny day flooding possibly by the year 2050. So when Climate Central put out this list of the top climate hazards for municipalities across the United States, For a big chunk of the East Coast, if you're on the East Coast, sea level rise, the dark blue is the big issue. But to step in from the East Coast, like here in our region, precipitation is our biggest worry with climate change, more so even than heat, because of the flooding that it's going to cause from the additional storm water. So precipitation becomes our issue. Hotter, wetter, weirder. My poster child for weirder is this guy who right after Hurricane Ida, when the Vine Street Expressway became this roiling river, decided to do something very Philadelphian, hop into an inner tube and go down it drinking beer. So he was drinking beer in an inner tube on the Vine Street Expressway, forgetting or never knowing that Philadelphia has combined sewer overflow. So on days when you got way too much rain that overwhelms the system, untreated raw sewage is just going right out. So this Vine Street Expressway has a lot of fecal coliform in there, and I hope this gentleman is still with us, because I can't imagine drinking something and with your hand in that water. There we go. So, weirder. So you see something like this on the evening news a lot more than you want to. That is, it's a severe weather week. This is Channel 3's news. But I just noticed just today, I'm sorry, and then their website also, CBS said, what's with the weird weather? So we're getting this severe weather, weird weather notices from everybody. But just today notices from USA Today that there's tomorrow for the country, there's a system that is extending from Texas into upstate New York. That's a huge chunk, and it's bringing thunderstorms, tornadoes, hailstorms the size of baseballs. So it's this massive system across many states that's got a huge amount of energy in it. To make hailstorm that big, to make tornadoes, you need a lot of energy. It's still only April. Systems should not have this much power in them yet. That's an August, September thing when it's had time to warm up. So the weather is changing. We're getting things out of season or unexpectedly like this. And then I promised you an explanation of the derecho at the bottom of this, the two derechos that came. And that's a photograph of what the derecho looked like as it was coming across the city of Philadelphia. It's a Spanish word, straight ahead. I heard someone describe it as a sideways tornado. Take a tornado, lay it on its side, and roll. And that kind of makes a lot of sense. It's a wide front that just barrels. And on June 3rd, 2020, this thing started up by Reading and ended down by the Jersey Shore. It just went through a huge chunk of PA into Jersey. And intense winds. 3 people died when trees and branches fell on their cars as they were driving. And 850,000 people were without power, some for multiple days. So big, intense storm. The Inquirer is right up for the next day. It turns out in the morning there was one system that was kind of interesting. Then the derecho came through, so you'll see that reference. For all the mayhem that unfolded Wednesday, it was a prolonged period of tranquility that was an essential ingredient for making June 3rd, 2020, one of the wildest days for weather in the region's history. Meteorologists themselves said they were in awe of what transpired around here from about 11 to 8 p.m. No one could recall a day in which 2 extreme wind events were generated by 2 very different systems. I was then directing a nature center in Roxborough, 300 acres. It came right over us and plowed through a 50-year-old grove of pine trees that we had planted in the 70s and just decapitated about a third of the pine trees. It was devastating for us at the nature center. And then our poster child from the weirder slide was Hurricane Ida from Labor Day weekend. Again, there's the Vine Street and the Schuylkill. So what you got was only 2.5 inches less so at the Philadelphia airport, which is the official monitoring station for the National Weather Service in the Philly region. So when you see rainfall mentioned on the evening news they're going to the Philadelphia airport. But you can see in some of the suburbs, northern and western, like out here, we got between 6 and 8 inches, essentially 1 month of rain in one night. And so that 8 inches then begins to, that's the 100-year storm that we approached. This is Main Street in Manayunk, where this business right here is actually on Venice Island between the Schuylkill River, which is to the right of the slide, and the Manayunk Canal, which is just beyond this business. This guy does car detailing, and you can see all those cars in his parking lot being detailed right now by the Schuylkill River. So it just the river jumped, hopped across Venice Island, went across the Manayunk Canal and into Main Street, devastated the businesses. And there are all these new condos, if you've driven into Manayunk, all these new condos on Venice Island. The firefighters and police had to get in boats to get people out of those things. But that storm also spawned tornadoes in a number of places. North, like Abington-ish, but then this is Mullica Hill on the Jersey side, where it took out some houses. So an intense storm from Hurricane Ida. So we're getting big storms. And then for me in the weird department was that June day 2 years ago when we couldn't go outside because Canadian wildfires were putting so much ash and soot into the sky. Again, I'm still at that nature center, which has a nature preschool, and we couldn't put the kids go outside. So it's a nature preschool, and we got to stay indoors because we got this going on. And there's the wildfires in Canada that were spawning this. So again, you've got record rainfall in some places, and then you've got big droughts in some other places. So here we had dry conditions in Canada, and then an epic storm. California seems to be the epicenter of anything and everything with climate change, so that, you know, in California, you'll get this huge drought, which lasts for a long time, and then suddenly the switch flips, and you get epic downpours and flooding. So we showed you the slide that winter is actually getting warmer, but what also is happening with climate change is that the jet stream way up above us is getting erratic and wobbly. And the jet stream determines so much of our weather. So when the jet stream goes south, it brings cold air from the north. When the jet stream goes north, it brings warm air from the south. So what we're doing is we're getting these wild fluctuations. So suddenly in November 2019, we had this blast of Arctic air and set low records. Not happening much. It does happen occasionally, but again, we got a wobbly, erratic jet stream. So the weather is doing strange things it's increasingly unpredictable for a lot of people. So what does all of this mean for us now that we've done hotter and wetter and weirder? One thing it means is that the number of billion-dollar disasters in the U.S. keeps going up. The insurance people have gotten, the insurance industry has religion on climate change. They're terrified of climate change because of what it means for them. This stops at 2023, so it doesn't have 2024's wildfires in Hawaii, which are going to put it way high up, and then California at the beginning of this year in 2025. So, that's only going to continue, but worse, the amount of time in between these billion-dollar events is shrinking. So we're getting more of them and less time to recover. And the agencies like FEMA that are there to respond to these have also been under budget cuts as well. So it'll be really intriguing to see how agencies like FEMA are able to respond to what's inevitably going to happen as we move into the summer. For me as a naturalist, I can see that the plants and animals around us have changed and are changing. So many southern birds have become more common. Just saw a Carolina wren in my backyard. Carolina wren is a signal to its name. They're very common now, but they weren't 20, 30, 40 years ago. Carolina chickadees, red-bellied woodpeckers, all southern birds. But this photograph is a black vulture. When I first moved to the Philadelphia region in the 80s, there was only one species of vulture, the turkey vulture. It's got a cousin now, a southern vulture, the black vulture. Its head is not red like the turkey vulture. So luckily the two get along. So now when I go bird watching, I have to see which species of vulture it is. So that's all changing. Nature is changing. More importantly than southern birds moving up is nature. Springtime for me is this elegant progression of a number of events. Where you first, when spring begins, the trees haven't leafed out. And so the sunshine is hitting the forest floor and it warms the forest floor. And all these ephemeral spring wildflowers pop up. So springtime in the Pennsylvania forest, you should get an explosion of wildflowers whose job it is to make flowers, get pollinated, make seeds, and do all this before the trees all leaf out and shade them out. And when you come by this forest in July, there's no sign of these wildflowers. There are rootstocks that pop up again next spring. So you got all this great activity happening with plants in forests. And then at the same time, all these insects begin waking up for whatever stage of their life cycle they were sleeping in, hibernating in. So here comes a bumblebee out, and it wants to find flowers to get pollen and nectar. That's fine. So flowers awaken, pollinators come out to get them. Birds are migrating through, like this scarlet tanager. This is the high time for bird migration right now. So great places to go see birds migrating. But anyway, when these birds arrive here, they're going to want to see the insects because they need the food. A number of the birds will stay here and set up shop and build nests like these cardinals. Now, the adult cardinal is a seed eater. That beak is just designed for chopping up seeds, but its young need protein, its young need bugs. So dad cardinal here is going to go out along with mom, and they're going to find caterpillars and other insects and stuff them down the throats of these hungry little nestlings. So what's happening in this spring is those things all happening, and the concern among biologists is what happens if the flowers emerge because they got early cues and the bugs aren't there to pollinate them. Or what happens if the bugs emerge and the flowers haven't yet come out, so there's nothing to pollinate? What happens if the birds come migrating through and there's no food for them? So this springtime parade that was once this elegant procession, almost predictable of A, then B, then C, then D, is now confused. And it's clear that there will be a shakeout. What's not clear is which species will be winners and which will be losers. So lots of people are watching, biologists and naturalists are watching that. So that's on the nature side. On the people side of what's going to happen, again, let's go back to our two rivers being tidal for big stretches. Here's a NOAA graph showing that the Delaware River has been rising steadily even since the early 1900s. So there's the Delaware River rising slowly over time. And then the Office of Sustainability produced these graphs, which show, here's the Delaware. Here we go, there's the cursor, the Delaware River with the Schuylkill coming up here. Unfortunately, they use the blue, so you really can't see it. But here is the airport and 1.5 degrees of warming. And we have a very wet Philadelphia International Airport, and the stadiums are right down here. So we got this issue, but do this to 3 degrees and we lose even more, especially of the city itself and even to the Jersey side. But look, South Philly will be highly impacted if we head up to 3 degrees of warming, and this little stretch of the Schuylkill Expressway actually will be underwater. And that continues up the Delaware on both sides, the Pennsylvania and the Jersey side. So we're going to lose communities that are tucked up against the Delaware River under 3 degrees of warming. The Office of Sustainability also put out this, where top left you can see the Schuylkill River with the river trail going alongside it, the 30th Street Station in the background behind it, the Sierra Center rising above that. With Irene in 2011, it jumped and over the river trail and over the railroad tracks, USX over here. And then if we get by the year 2100 with moderate emissions, so we've pulled back, present trends don't exactly continue, we pull back a little bit, and we only, quote, get 4 only, 4 feet of sea level rise. The Schuylkill River will stay within its banks and won't quite compromise the Schuylkill River Trail, which is great. But if we have this condition and get a Hurricane Irene, then look what happens. It just goes right into Center City. So that's the concern with sea level rise, is when the big storm comes, you're going to get above what that is. So here's a graphic showing the Philadelphia airport tucked up against the Delaware River. Actually, Delaware dredge fill was used to build it. Schuylkill Expressway dredge was used to build the airport. And here we are, the planes taxiing through water if we get 3-4 feet of sea level rise. And FDR Park with the stadiums up in here. There's health issues with this, especially in the city of Philadelphia, where you got an urban heat island where in these dark red areas, 556,000 people will feel 9 degrees hotter. So if we're getting more 100-degree days, they're going to feel like it's 109 to 110 over in here. And the problem with that is there are lots of people who are vulnerable to heat in those communities. This is the heat vulnerability index put up by the city's health department, and you can see it's clustered in West, South, and North Philly, especially. So there's an economic justice issue with this as well, where people can't afford, for example, good air conditioning. So sadly, the number of heat-related deaths in the state is likely to rise. With no cuts in emissions by 2100, it raises a lot. If we have deep cuts, we can keep things to where we currently are, or just a modest increase. Deep cuts. This is a strange one. Another study came out of looking at a correlation between temperature and the murder rate. And what they found is on hot days, the murder rate goes up. People are angrier, testier. And of all these cities, look where the murder rate goes up the highest. Darn it, Philadelphia beats Detroit, Milwaukee, Atlanta, New Orleans. So we have the highest increase in the murder rate on very hot days. And another surprise, this one was called out by Philadelphia Magazine, that Philadelphia will see an influx of climate refugees. Again, there's a new phrase. So as New York City, as the water around New York City rises, as the Jersey Shore rises, we could possibly get 300,000 refugees by the end of this century, ranking us 5th in the U.S. behind Austin, Atlanta, Houston, and Orlando. So again, climate refugees, a new issue to worry about. Don't want to leave you there. There's just 1 million people working on 1 million solutions to climate change every day. But for me, unfortunately, we've been going as a country in the wrong direction for too long. We've known about the data for 40 years and haven't done enough about it. For me, it feels like this cartoon kind of summarizes things. The issue is that big and our response so far has been that small. So, we have a lot of homework to do. Lots of good news coming out. The United Kingdom became the first major economy to shut down its last coal-fired power plant. So we're moving in that direction. UK, made famous by Charles Dickens for burning coal, is now weaned itself off of coal. Solar is on a path to beat coal by 2033. Solar is coming on strong and fast, so is wind. And in surprising places, Texas is becoming a hotspot for solar because they have so much sun, so that's good. The U.S. is getting increasing amounts of its electricity from non-fossil fuels, still 58% across the country, but wind and solar now 17%. Pennsylvania is behind the curve. The first oil well was drilled in Pennsylvania. We're a fracking state. Coal's been big for a very long time. So we only got 3% from wind and solar. 2/3 is still fossil fuels. We'll see how that goes. Good news, 96% of new U.S. power plants in 2024 were carbon free. 96%. In 2024, for the first time ever, wind and solar combined generated more electricity than coal in the U.S. as renewables continue to surge and coal plants retire. So that's great. So good things are happening. The city of Philadelphia itself promised an 80% drop in greenhouse gases by 2050. I'd love to hear some reports on how they're doing. It's like several mayors after this promise, but nonetheless, they've been trying to head in that direction. Here in this region, we got to change the Schuylkill Expressway paradigm and stop doing this. Need to invest in SEPTA. We keep under-investing in SEPTA, unfortunately. Happily, major car companies have all come on with electric vehicles, and you've all seen the commercials. More and more electric vehicles are coming out now, which is great. We finally solved that. Cities still look like this at night when there's nobody in those buildings, so we need to make cities even more efficient than they already are. The Eagles have made huge moves in sustainability with wind and solar. They're one of the most sustainable sports teams in all of sports across the U.S., which is great. If you want to do one thing, if you want to do just one thing to make an impact on climate change, you don't necessarily have to go meatless, but if you cut down on beef, this is the single act with the biggest payoff. Cows burp an extraordinary amount of methane. They just belch methane as they eat, as their stomach is digesting the grass. And what happens is methane is a much, much more powerful greenhouse gas than CO2. CO2 lasts longer, which is why we worry about it more. Methane doesn't last as long. But when it's there, it's very potent. So, and this is exacerbated by so much of our beef now is coming from third world countries where they're taking out forests. So they're removing forests whose job it is to sequester CO2, right? Burning them to make pasture. So they're releasing that CO2 and then putting cows on there who are belching methane. So in third world countries, you get essentially a triple-fold problem with beef. You get those three things happening. So Michael Pollan, one of the best food writers around, great. If you haven't picked up a Michael Pollan book, it's a real treasure. It's a real treat. Check him out. Even one meatless day a week, a meatless Monday, which is a movement across the whole planet. If everybody in America did that, a meatless Monday, that's it. That would be the equivalent of taking 20 million mid-size sedans off the road. Isn't that crazy? My wife and I have decided that we have beef on special occasions, so 2-3 times a year. We're meatless multiple days. Actually, it turns out that any other form of protein beats beef on the carbon front. So chicken, turkey, all better. Oh, and save 35,000 gallons of water by a meatless Monday. So planting trees is a great thing to do. They pull lots of CO2 out. Wonderful Chinese proverb says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So lots of April opportunities with Earth Day, then Arbor Day to go tree planting. So help and jump into any of those, and they'll be sequestering because those forests absorb CO2 and produce extraordinary amounts of oxygen. So plant trees as often as you can. If you want to really do a deep dive into this, you can put climate apps on your phone and become a citizen scientist. So there's a million things you can do to help with the climate issue. So as I promised, we go back to the beginning and let's see how we're doing on our pop quiz. How many parts per million of carbon dioxide are in the air right now? B, you got it. Which season is changing fastest? Yep. Which Philadelphia's large precipitation events have increased by what % recently? Remember, it was the big number down here, see, 360%. And by 2100, Philadelphia's climate will most closely resemble which American city? Brownsville, Texas. How'd you do? We're the first generation to feel the effects of climate change, said Barack Obama a number of years ago, and the last generation who can do something about it. So I've been teaching about climate change for decades, literally, and had always said this is something our children and grandchildren have to worry about. That's no longer the case. It's here. and it's now. And if there are people who still don't know that climate change, don't believe that climate change is really happening, I love this slide. What if it's a big hoax and we create a better world for nothing? Because those are all the spin-offs of moving to wind and solar, getting off of fossil fuels. You get all those benefits. So even if it's a hoax, look at the better world that we would be creating. So check out the book if you'd like when the talk is over. It's got 25 walks in the region, calendarized. Spring has a number of walks that you can do right now that have the best places for wildflowers and birds in the region, so check that out. My website is here. And I want to thank you again for having me and open the floor to questions.
Can you go back to the website just to see it? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to copy that down. That's
Oh, you got it. Thank you. Yeah, MikeWildbacker.com.
Right now, in my backyard, I'm not noticing the vigor of some of my trees, that ornamentals that at this time of year I would expect. Like my yellowwood in my front yard has leaves, but they're not as numerous or as large as I would expect.
Huh.
And the same for a sycamore tree as well. Now, the drought, certainly in Wayne, I think is a factor. We have not had a good inches of rainfall in one event, I think, for a year, I would say. We've had a torrential rainfall in the past month, I think 2 or 3 times, but I measured only maybe 1/3 of an inch for that rainfall, which is nothing. So let's hope this trend doesn't continue.
Yeah, we're behind in rainfall for the year right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, again.
So,
Even though it's supposed to be wetter, we're behind again, yeah.
yeah. Now, we're in the corner of the state, the southeast corner of the state, which is like climate zone 4A, or it's different than the rest of the state, I've noticed.
What is the, excuse me, what is the U.S. government doing as far as like trying to figure out how to increase cloud cover?
Oh, yeah, what a great question. So there's been a lot of conversation about things we can do since we haven't, over the last 40 years, held back how much, the CO2 that we're putting in the atmosphere. What technological fixes can we do to compensate for where we are? And one of them is to put something in the atmosphere that, aerosols or something that kind of blocks the sun, right? The problem is there's A, that's expensive, B, that is a huge experiment with possibly bigger downsides than the experiment we're doing with pumping so much CO2 in the atmosphere. So there are conversations about it. Of course, the current government has no interest in this topic at all, so we're not going to go very far in the next 4 years. Hard to know how this is all going to unfold. Because, I keep waiting for some epic event to occur that's finally going to get people to go, oh, okay, this is really happening. And, wildfires don't seem to do it. Big hurricanes don't seem to do it. We seem to be fine with putting up with these huge, epic weather events, and none of them make us change the trend in any significant direction. But as I noticed, the marketplace is also responding differently, and electric cars are coming on strong. So I don't know, there's a lot of things at play right here. It's a very confusing time for everybody on the climate change side of how it's all going to shake out. But I think most people worry that solutions like that are more science fiction than science reality. And there actually there are great science fiction books about doing experiments like this. Yeah, you should check them out.
I was going to ask, sometimes in conversations with family and friends about climate change,
Yeah.
a response that I hear often is, oh, well, I don't know if I can make a difference unless the government and corporations start to make a bigger difference.
Yeah.
And I have no idea how to respond to that.
Yeah. It's hard. And the truth is, I forget, some crazy number, the vast majority of the CO2 that's in the atmosphere is put out by like these 100 companies. So there's a huge burden. There should be a huge burden on especially petrochemical companies to do this. We talked in the microplastics lecture a few months ago that plastics themselves, the amount of CO2 that they generate, they'd be the 5th largest nation by greenhouse gas emissions, the plastics industry. So, yeah, there should be a burden on those big companies to lead the way, and they're not yet. But I feel like it's inevitable. I feel like it's inevitable that we get off fossil fuels. And what I've also been saying for the last many years is that we have a window of opportunity to sort of slide through and get this taken care of in time. It's sort of like those Mission Impossible movies where the door is closing and they slide under. Like I feel like that's where we've been. And I don't know if the window just closed or not with the recent election. I don't know if there's a possibility the window closed. I can't tell. So the best we can do is not make it as bad as it might be, as opposed to stop it from happening at all. It's not a very upbeat answer to the question, but that's kind of where we are. I do feel it's each of our responsibility to pay attention to it and do something about it, and let those companies that we use their product, let them know. There's always that. But if millions of people go meatless on Mondays, there's an easy thing to do that changes things dramatically. Thank you.
Maybe two things.
Yeah.
The comic that you had up there.
Yeah.
Of the one you had, and there are so many. Yeah, up on the big screen, there's so many jobs coming from that.
Yes.
That it makes perfect sense. It
Yes.
doesn't to the oil companies, but to
Yes.
everybody else, it does
Correct.
make sense.
Correct.
So the job things, there's tons of jobs, and it would be great for us to do that.
Yeah, it would. And this has been a 20-year conversation that we haven't made we've made some progress, not as much as we might, but unfortunately, because if we had doubled down on wind and solar 20, 30 years ago, we could be leading the world in that right now. We've had, we've not made a national push in that direction. China has. So China, unfortunately, is becoming the global leader in wind and solar. And so we lost a huge opportunity. And we talk about jobs all the time, and have lost this huge opportunity for really great jobs in this country. It's kind of sad to watch it happen, but that's where we've been.
Yeah, and I know solar and even lithium batteries.
Yep.
We designed those long ago. The U.S.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then China.
Yes.
Started doing it. And
Yes.
Kept doing it. We didn't do it.
Yeah. And China, interesting, controls a lot of the rare earth metals that are needed for the production of these things. So there's so much subtext in all of this. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you said where the cows are going used to be, say, the forest was there, and then they're burning that stuff.
Well, so if the Brazilian rainforest, for example, is burned to put cattle there, you get that threefold effect. Yes.
Yeah. And even I noticed when I go hiking towns now, if there's a tree that's fallen, they leave the tree there. They don't take it away or chop it up for firewood. They let it go into the soil or for the bugs to get, which I think is helpful.
It depends on when the tree is, but yeah. I mean, nature loves dead trees because they're, one of the twin environmental issues to climate change is biodiversity and the protection of the Earth's the species that live here. And so leaving dead trees in place is sometimes a great thing to do for a forest. If it's not in the way or going to endanger anybody, there's a whole set of organisms adapted for taking care of that tree. And so, just starting with woodpeckers, mushrooms, for gosh sakes. So anyway, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you've explored our website, the Environmental Advisory Council website on radnor.org, we have all of our EAC lectures for the past 2 years recorded. Many of them deal with climate issues as well as ways to address the climate issues, solar panels, for example, electric vehicles. So if you haven't seen our website, take a look. Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
On that note, I would like to ask if you have the name of a landscaping company, whether it serves your property or just your neighborhood, if you could give me the name of that landscaping company. The reason, and serves in the Radnor Township area ideally, but it doesn't have to be. The reason is the Lower Merion EAC, the Environmental Advisory Council, is having a workshop where they're inviting landscaping companies to have hands-on experience with electric lawn equipment. So everything from lawnmowers, small lawnmowers, big lawnmowers, leaf blowers, weed whackers, etc. And this is, of course, something that is very critical to our environment, because if you live around here, most people don't do their own lawns. They rely on a landscaping company that uses big, heavy equipment, backpack leaf blowers, riding mowers, and even for small plots, like in my neighborhood, an 1/8 acre property will have a riding mower going around. So the pollution, both noise and air pollution caused by these machines, is one of the things that our EAC is very concerned about. So if you have a name of a landscaper, we will then invite that company to come to this free workshop, which is June 17th in Villanova. Thank you.